In last week's show, I promised that in this week's show, that's this one, the one you're watching, that we would talk about how to build a perfect model of your imperfect funnel. I lied. I got talked into by a client talking today about a different subject, completely different. So forgive me if you will. Imagine that you're in a prospect meeting. You're meeting a client or a prospective client for the first time ever, and you've got 7 really cracking questions that you're going to ask them. And whether you're using spin, which teaches us to use troubling questions, or using conceptual selling, which is somewhat more bespoke for each opportunity, whatever approach you're taking, you're certainly going into that meeting armed with some great questions that are really troubling. So you've got these 7 great questions and you get to question 3 and it just bombs. Where do you go from there? How do you actually get through your whole agenda? Question 4 is the one that was going to strike a chord, but you never get to find that out because at question 3, you've failed 3 times, you just don't get to go forward. How can you get your whole agenda on the table to get to ask question 4 for next time?
Funnel Vision is brought to you by Math Marketing, creators of the Funnel Plan. Math Marketing is the source of the 1, 2, 3 of B2B.
There's actually more to the question. Certainly we need to get through our whole story with the prospect, but we need our whole story to stick as well, rather than just appear like a fishing expedition of multiple, almost unrelated questions. We need the pattern to start to form that, hang on, you're honing in on something here. There's a bigger conversation that you're around the edges of. We need that for 2 reasons. One is so we can actually discuss the core issue and reframe in the prospect's mind what it is that the core issue ought to be, rather than some of the tangential issues. The other thing is, if you just fail in that meeting because right now the core issue and its contributors just aren't the issue of the day for this prospect, they will be at some point, so you need your story to stick. So the question really becomes, how can we create a compelling story around which we can ask lots of questions so that we can get through the whole agenda and that it sticks? So in this week's show, we'll show you how to run a perfect prospecting meeting. I want to put 3 ideas in your head before arguing what we actually need. The first one is, let's get in the buyer's shoes. Imagine from their perspective, they're sitting in the meeting, their listening skills are imperfect and your communication skills are imperfect. Sorry. The idea transfer is therefore going to be imperfect. So you thought you actually asked the right question and they thought they heard a different question and they answered a different question. So it's kind of imperfect. That's part of the problem. Also, as you're going around your multiple questions, maybe you've got a list of I keep doing this, you'll see in a moment why. Let me change that and say, you're going through your list of questions. You'll see me come back to this in a moment. You're going through your list of questions. It runs the risk of looking somewhat like a fishing expedition. You know, these are interesting questions, but they're not really taking us anywhere, and they just might not stick. And the third thing to think about while you're thinking about the buyer's shoes, which is the first big idea, is they're automatically guarded. You know, they know that you're selling. They're going to have their filter up a little bit, even if you're warm and charming and you've earned the right to be there. And even if they're particularly receptive on this day, they're still going to be somewhat guarded. So collectively, we've got an imperfect receptivity, this imperfect communication, this fishing expedition, the guardedness, all of that, think from the buyer's perspective. Now, stay in the buyer's perspective and think about ideas that stick. And there's kind of 2 angles to this. One is that your multiple questions had some kind of root, something underneath them. Maybe there's a root cause, maybe there's a big picture. There's something underneath your list of questions. But that something won't be clear unless you make it clear. And that's got 2 consequences. One is in the flow of the meeting, again, the fishing expedition thing, it's kind of, I'm not quite sure where we're going here. Secondly, if the meeting fails, then the opportunity for the big idea to stick is going to be really hard if what they got is actually 7 interesting, unrelated questions. So we need to sort of cohere it both for on the day and for later. Now, third thought I want to put in your head, so first two were that the buyer is a little bit imperfect in their reception of your message. The second thought is that your message has many parts and there's no sort of cohering idea, there's no central idea. Third thought is around the problem that you solve in the market actually does have multiple parts. So there's a core problem that you're really good at solving. I know you solve many problems, but there's one that you're a cracker at solving. And that problem has many causes. It could be caused by this or this or this. That's that little thing I was starting to talk about. There could be multiple causes for this one core idea. And you don't need the prospect to have all of those causes, just any of them that lead to that core idea. Likewise, that problem, that core problem, has many triggers. There could be any number of different circumstances that suddenly bring the problem to the surface. Now, triggers are different from causes. Causes are going on, triggers suddenly make the problem an A-lister. And then there's consequences. Because you've got this problem, you've got these things going on. So our idea is complex, but it's not being received well and it's not sticking. So what we really need is some way of running the meeting that lets us do, I think, 4 things. Firstly, it lets the prospect scan ahead. You know, if questions 1, 2 and 3 just aren't striking a chord, but question 4 is going to, let them guide you to that point. Certainly let them see the whole picture, don't keep it a secret. Secondly, it gives you a framework for actually asking all of those questions despite my last point. So I get that this is the primary cause for you of this problem, but let me just diligently, for a minute, explore these other ones, because I've seen them pretty often. Tell me why it is that you think that that's not causing this issue. And I can diligently explore all of the topics because I've found one that struck a chord. And that is important, because quite often it isn't just the one that struck a chord, it's a little bit of the others as well. And that leads me to point 3. It lets you create a bigger problem, and to point 4, somewhat reposition the problem to the one that you solve. You might be good at solving this root cause, but so could others. Likewise, another root cause, but so could others, and so on. But perhaps your strength is in solving that collection of problems and what the problem that they really lead to. That's quite common. So it really lets you, and this is my 4th point, lets you reframe their thinking around what the problem really is that they should be solving. Let me use Math Marketing's own sales conversations as a framework for having this conversation so we get out of the theory and get to practical. When I'm having a first meeting, I don't know whether the prospect's problem is going to be that they lack marketing skills, or I don't know whether I'm going to sell them Funnel Academy for marketing skills, or Miller Hyman for sales skills, Funnel Camp to build a combined process for sales and marketing, Funnel Mastery, maybe they've got multiple constituencies or stakeholders whose plans need to be built. I won't know that from a first meeting. It's a discovery meeting. And so I really need to keep an open mind. But in each case, all of those products solve in a different way one core problem, which is my sales and marketing engine is underperforming. Key elements, it's sales and marketing, that it's not an engine. A lot of people look at that problem statement and say, man, I don't even have an engine, let alone underperforming. Well, that's their version of that problem. But the core problem is my sales and marketing engine's underperforming. Now that could be caused because marketing's skills and language are not up to par. It could be because sales' skills and language are not up to par, by the way, in process for both. It could be that sales and marketing lack a clear and combined process. There are a number of different potential sub-causes of that core problem. And what I need to do is to flush out what the prospect's doing about each of those root causes and why it is that they're a problem and the extent to which they're a problem. If number 1's a biggie and number 2's not, I need to flush that out. So I need some kind of diagram. Now, some meetings I'll be conducting, it's just you and me meeting across a table, and so I need something like maybe it's an A3 card, big card stock, and we'll draw on it together because we're together exploring why, to what extent, this core problem is an issue for you. Sometimes that meeting might be in a whiteboarding session, so I'll forgive my back here. I'll be on a whiteboard and we're having the conversation. This is the core problem. These are the potential root causes. Tell me how this is playing out. Tell me how this is playing out, and so on. Whatever the delivery case, I need a discovery tool that allows the prospect to cycle ahead a bit, allows me to explore deeply each of the subtopics, allows me to create a coherent whole, and in the process lets me reframe it away from a point problem that I can solve, but so can others, to a bigger problem that I can solve uncommonly well. And that's what we need the meeting to help us to achieve. And so we need a meeting tool and or a whiteboarding tool to have that very conversation.
If you enjoyed this blog, then likely you will enjoy others. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to receive this blog by visiting mathmarketing.com/blog or by visiting our YouTube channel. If you have a colleague who may be interested, we would be so grateful if you invited them to subscribe. Why don't you do that now? And when you come back, we'll show you how we do that in Funnel Plan.
As you know, Funnel Plan is a great way to capture your objectives, your strategy, your velocity, and the tactics that sales and marketing are going to use to earn the right to serve new customers. Today we're talking about the problem and how we get the problem agreed with the prospect, and in particular the problem as we see it, not just, gee, what problems do you have, because it's potential that they have problems that we don't want to focus on because we can't uniquely solve them. Rather, we're trying to get them troubled about the problem that we uniquely solve. So it's a very directed conversation. In that context, therefore, a couple of things on the funnel plan I want to focus on. Firstly, what is the problem that you're solving? The problem analysis tool in Funnel Plan lets you and the rest of your team identify a really long list of problems that you might consider focusing on, to then aggressively wrestle that down to a select few, and finally to choose one that you most want to focus on. So understanding the core problem is a critical start. Let's dive now down to the tactics. And again, I'm going to zoom in because I want to talk about just tactics that relate to gap acknowledged. The end of the gap acknowledged stage is the prospect says, gee, I have a problem that I need to solve that you seem to understand deeply. That's where we're trying to get them to. Now I want to make a point about this particular funnel plan. It's only a sample one, but in this sample one, there are a couple of ways to get to the gap acknowledged stage. In fact, there are three. In particular, they could have responded to an outbound video, highly targeted, we call a VBR video from Mel Hyman, it's a valid business reason, an outbound video that specifically targeted what we think their pains are. That might have been how we earned the meeting in this example. It might have been we earned the meeting through some sort of web behaviour and then interacting with a digital asset like a white paper, or it might be that they responded and came to an in-house event. Now the in-house event would have a troubling effect, but because we're one-on-many, not one-on-one, we can't yet presume that the buyer's really connected to the problem personally. So we still need to meet with them. Likewise, the white paper could have been talking about the problem, should be talking about the problem, but we can't yet presume they really buy into it. And the same thing with the video. It's a short video that we're going to follow up really quickly, but we can't yet presume the buyer's really bought into the problem. So the gap might have been hinted at, alluded to, sort of acknowledged, but not really. We still need the meeting. So we're now having this meeting caused by one of those three initial tactics. Now, right now, the tactic says personal meeting to explore the costs and consequences of, and in this case, failure to innovate, because this is a tactic, it was a sample tactic. Whatever your problem is what you'd put down here. Now, that's what it's got so far, but it presupposes that the salesperson will conduct the personal meeting in the best way they know how. Let's give them some tools to do that even better. Switching across to the funnel plan software, I've got already my blogging video open. I'm going to scroll down to the tactics. This will surface a whole list of tactics because it's all of the tactics that we have in the funnel plan, and I really only want to make a very small change to one of those tactics. Now the tactic that I want, these are all sorted by stage, and therefore the gap acknowledge stage is kind of midway through the tactics list. So let me get to the gap acknowledge section and find the tactic that we're after. Now here it is, it's the first tactic in the tactics list for the gap acknowledged stage. Now it's first because we want it to appear at the top of the plan. Let me go back to my plan. It's sitting up here at the top. It's not actually first in order. The arrows make clear the sequencing here. So it's the top of this list, and I want to make just the smallest change. Personal meeting to explore the costs and consequences of failure to innovate. Insert your problem here. Let me just kind of highlight that in that way to make clear that we're inserting whatever the problem is, using pre-printed meeting tool or whiteboarding session. And frankly, how will I know which one to use? If I turn up to the meeting and there's 4 people there, I'm going to whiteboard. If I turn up to the meeting and there's 1 person there, I'm going to use the meeting tool. The meeting tool needs to capture the core problem and the potential causes. You might even include some of the consequences of the problem in that meeting tool. Remember what you're trying to do with the meeting tool, whether it's whiteboarded or done on a piece of paper. You're trying to get them to jump ahead to their version of the pain, the part that's hurting them. Secondly, you're using the tool to make sure that you get the right to deep dive into all of the other topics just in case, because quite often, yes, the one that they went to is the big one, but it's supported by other problems. And thirdly, lets you reframe the problem to a coherent whole and make it stick. Very important. I hope that helps. In next week's show, I'll show you how to build a perfect model of your imperfect funnel. I promise I will do it this time. Until then, may your funnel be full and always flowing.